before his fan base started throwing Liberty Walk kits and tacky gold paint on him, this car was a leader in motorsport success and technological innovation. Welcome to the Nissan GTR. Every great has to have an introduction, and the GTR was no exception. The first instance of the term Skyline, or Skyline GTR as they would later be known, but the first term of Skyline was used all the way back in 1957 with the Prince Skyline Sport. Now, Prince was later Nissan, but for the time being, from 1957 to 1967, the Skyline Sport made a respectable 94 horsepower and 113 torque, and since it weighed less than 3,000 pounds, had a top speed of 93 miles an hour. That was actually quite good for a Japanese company back then, but of course, with a new era, there was a new Skyline. 1968 was the Skyline 2000 GTX. Not the GTR, that comes later. GTX. This boosted power to 130 thanks to a new straight-six engine. And it even had a four-door version. But the first time the GTR name would properly be used is 1969 with the Nissan Prince Skyline GTR. 160 horsepower, 130 torque, and it already began its racing prowess in just 4 years of production. The GTR won 50 races across Asia. That's pretty good. And it wasn't fighting, other Asian cars. It was fighting Porsches and BMWs. And, oh, by the way, they only made 197 of them. So it's, crazy rare. Fast forward to 1985. It's the 1980s. And Reagan hasn't been shot yet. Back to the Future is on the silver screen. And the Nissan Skyline R31 has arrived. Now, this was a homologated version for touring car racing. It was called the GTSR. And the road version made 207 horsepower, very respectable for the 80s. It was a proper sports car, rivaling the likes of the, actually, far superior than the Corvette at the era, because, let's be honest, that was probably the worst generation of Corvettes ever. Now, the touring car that it was based on had 430 horsepower, but if that wasn't crazy enough for you, there was this thing called Super Silhouette Racing. Basically, you had to have the roof, the doors, and the hood the same as the production car. Nothing else had a match, meaning this space frame tubular chassis with massive fender flares, a massive wing, and a crazy exhaust system was a Nissan Skyline. And its i6 engine made over 560 horsepower in a vehicle that weighed less than 2,300 pounds. It was quick. It didn't quite win the championship, but it was blisteringly fast. And they carried that blisteringly fast speed into the R32. If the R32 is to the R31 what the R31 was to the Skyline name overall. A game changer. Officially, it made 276 horsepower, thanks to a gentleman's agreement similar to the German one, with a top speed of 155. This was their version of that agreement. But in reality, it made around 300 horsepower. And it had a brand new all-wheel drive system, meaning 0 to 60, 4.7 seconds. Quarter mile, 12.8 seconds. And 8 minutes and 20 seconds. That is how long it took the R32 road car to go around the Nürburgring in 1990. So, you would think with all these Nürburgring times and incredible 0 to 60 and all-wheel drive, it would be rather good at racing. And you would be right. In Japan, out of the 29 races it entered for the Japanese Touring Car Championship, it won 29. And in case you're keeping track, 29 divided by 29 is 100% of the races. Needless to say, they won that championship. And that wasn't the only place. You see, down in Australia, upside down, they were being dominated by the Ford Cosworth in touring cars. The Nissan changed all that. And it was so successful in Australia, it was called the Beast from the East, or more affectionately named Godzilla. So there you go. How does the nickname of one of the most iconic cars of all time get started? A bunch of Aussies losing to a four-wheel drive monster. That touring car, by the way, made 500 horsepower. And thanks to its four-wheel drive and incredible lightweight, it won the Bathurst Endurance Race 2 years in a row, and the championship 3 years in a row. It was so dominant, Australian regulators rewrote the entire rulebook for 1994, to the point where they had rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated V8s. That kind of sounds like the modern V8 Supercar Championship. And they had to do a similar thing, creating the new GT 500 class in Japan. So, they made another Skyline, this time being the R33. And it had around a similar horsepower, only this time it was officially labeled as 296 horsepower. And thanks to some brand new computer technology from the mid-90s, because that's what the mid-90s were all about, it was the first road car to lap the Nürburgring in less than 8 minutes. And remember that brand new GT 500 class in Japan that the R32 created? Yeah, well, the R33 dominated that as well, and it was so dominant, the only car that could defeat it was the McLaren F1. And that's not the only place McLaren and Nissan battled. You see, they made a special edition R33 called the GTR LM for Le Mans, because that is where they competed with the R33, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and they did a respectable 5th place in their class, 10th place overall. Not bad. And to celebrate this, they threw that Le Mans engine into a road car, and they called it the 400R. And you guessed it, it had 400 horsepower and 350 torque. It went over 180 miles an hour. And they made about 150 of them. It's another crazy, rare version. But out with the R33, and in with the R34. It's like one of the best looking Japanese cars of all time, and you cannot change my mind about that. It is brilliant. The R34 had several different option packages for the first time in ages. It had the GTR, which had 327 horsepower and 300 torque. But there was also the V-Spec 2 GTR, with air conditioning, interior trim, rear wipers. You don't need all that stuff, it just adds weight. And if that wasn't crazy enough for you, there was the Nissan GTR Skyline V-Spec 2 Nürburgring Edition. Yes, that is the most German name for a Japanese car of all time. And it was basically similar to the V-Spec 2, but a bit lighter. And it had a electronic speed limiter of 186 miles an hour. But if that wasn't crazy enough for you, there was a very limited run, 20 limited run of Nissan GTR Skyline V-Spec 2 Nürburgring Edition Nismos. This had a bored-out i6, 2.6 liters, and it made 500 horsepower to all four wheels. And let's not forget, Paul Walker drove one. And it remains one of the best-looking, crazy, most iconic movie cars of all time. Now, by far the strangest vehicle ever to wear the GTR badge is the 2015 Nissan GTR LM Nismo. You see, it has nothing in common with the GTR except for the name, because this is a front-wheel drive LMP car. What? Yeah, it has 950 horsepower going to the front wheels. It debuted at the 2015 Rolex 24-hour endurance race at Daytona International Speedway, was deemed uncompetitive, and the program was therefore scrapped. So it didn't live very long, lived about 24 hours, the car. But the fact that they were able to make a front-wheel drive LMP car even function is a feat of engineering genius. I realize that it lost big time, but the fact that it even functioned is incredible. And then sales had stopped. The dot-com bubble burst, sales dwindled, and production halted in 2002. And it would stay halted until 2007, with the brand new release of the Nissan GTR. Wait, what happened to the Skyline name? Oh, they got rid of that. They don't want that anymore. But don't worry, it's still called the R35, because they want to have the numerical systems in order, but with a different name and just a GTR. I don't know. The point is, it, in 2007, it had a 3.8 liter V6. Yes, it got rid of the i6. I know. It's sad. It sounds very boring now, but whatever. And it made a respectable 565 horsepower. And despite weighing 2 tons, it does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and a top speed of 196 miles per hour. And again, if that wasn't crazy enough for you, there's the Nismo GTR with 600 horsepower, and it pulls 1.08 G in the corner. That's a lot for a car that heavy, especially. And thanks to that incredible power and ridiculous G, it did a Nürburgring lap of 7 minutes, 8 seconds. In 2015, when it ran that lap, it was the 6th fastest car in the history of the Nürburgring. And just like all the others that came before it, it was quite invested in some motorsport. It won the 2008 Super GT Championship in Japan, and it won the Bathurst 12-hour endurance race again in Australia. And then it wasn't as competitive. So, what is the future for the Nissan Skyline GTR / GTR, whatever it's called now? Well, There is no news on the R36 other than it will be coming eventually, have some patience. But in the meantime, they have the limited run 50 units of the GTR 50, made entirely out of carbon fiber, making 700 horsepower, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Nissan. And it costs $1.1 million. Damn. In the meantime, while all this debacle is going on about the next generation, because let's be honest, the current one is very old. It's 12 years old. It needs a refresh by now. So in the meantime, people have been tuning the hell out of them. And none are more tuned than the Alpha Omega GTR, which is probably the pinnacle of GTR tuning. This thing makes 1,750 horsepower going to all four wheels. And did I mention, it does a quarter mile in 7 seconds at 186 miles an hour. Bear in mind, in 1997, the R33 Skyline barely did 186 miles an hour period, and this is doing that in a quarter mile. And it does 0 to 60 in a scarcely believable 1.7 seconds. 1.7. And thanks to that 1,700 horsepower and blistering 0 to 60 in the standing half mile, it can do 212 miles an hour in half a mile from a standstill. The GTR may be old and decrepit, 12 years old now, but with a new R36 trickling down the pipeline ever so slowly, its car culture, legacy, history, and pure speed shall keep it going for years to come.